delighted today to be joined by Gary Kemp, Dara Connolly, Fiona Felderman, Jackie Patton. Thank you so much for joining me, Kojo. Thanks everyone for watching. And yeah, stay tuned for next time. Thanks everyone. Hi everyone, thank you for joining me on my LinkedIn Live. This is Yo Live, and I'm excited today to be joined by Ealána Boyle. I met her, gosh, it must be maybe a couple of months ago when I was planning a summit on Clubhouse. Some of you may know we have Business Scotland over in Clubhouse. It's a club just under 1,000 members just now. And I went to one of the amazing kind of Scottish women business groups, and I asked if anyone was doing any cool things in the sustainable business space. And up came Ealána. So since then, she's been on the summit, and it was such a fantastic conversation. We could have gone on. And I thought I better get her on my LinkedIn Live and get my network to kind of listen to her story and support what she's doing. Hi, Ealána. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, Kemi. Thank you for having me. Yeah, no, it's been great. It seems such a whirlwind since we first engaged via a Facebook comment thread.
I know.
Like, hey, who's doing stuff? And I was like, me, I'm doing it. Yeah, over on the Isle of Arran, just off the west coast of Scotland. I'm starting to develop a sustainable-led food production company, which is actually a sister brand to our restaurant as well, which is, again, completely sustainability focused. Really looking forward to the next little while having a conversation with you, getting to talk about it all and get to know one another more. So thank you for having me, and yeah.
Looking forward to it. Listen, if you're watching now and or later and you've got any questions for us, feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll definitely be getting to those later. But I wanted to go right back to the beginning, Ealána, because I know a little bit about obviously what you're doing over in the Isle of Arran. But it'd be good to understand your background. Like, where did you start? You know, what did you study? What were your interests before you started doing what you're doing now?
That's a very good question. I grew up on Arran. This is where I was raised. I was here until I left high school. My background, kind of professional background, is in equestrianism and agriculture, really. I left school and did HND and then managed horse yards and groomed for kind of international riders at quite an elite level. I then did a degree in Equine Sports Science. I've always worked in hospitality, and I've always been friends in and around, young farmers, agriculture, that kind of side of it. I came on board to take on the general manager's position at my dad's restaurant about 3 years ago now, 2018. And it was then that we decided to rebrand to Crofters, to kind of take what we were called fiddlers. We were called fiddlers previously. It was very much about the grassroots live music, which is my dad's thing. He is a musician, a fiddler, plays guitar and sings as well. When I came on board, we decided to rebrand to Crofters to kind of put the emphasis back onto the food, onto the people, onto the processes, and ultimately onto what was, and in my mind, the lifestyle that should be the most sustainable option of living in a rural environment. We grew up, obviously, here in a rural environment with livestock, with kind of small holding. We grew all our own veg and stuff as well. And a big part for me in my personal life was kind of growing up in that, but also really quite detached from kind of the world's global aspect of agriculture, to coming into agriculture, being a vegetarian. And then my previous partner was a deer stalker and a gamekeeper. We also grew our own stuff at home. And it was that connection to food and to growing and producing and catching and landing and living to what I deemed the most sustainable way that really started driving the whole ethos and the vision and the mission behind what we're doing at Crofters as a whole, really. Yeah, I think that's the synopsis of what my background is in.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of reflection and thought process into what you've done so far. And I'm wondering whether at the beginning of that process, so I didn't realize you had this rebrand, which is really fascinating. So at the beginning of that whole process of rebranding, how much of sustainability, which we're going to speak more of in a minute, did you already know, or did yourself and your dad, how much of sustainability and what it meant to be a sustainable business did you know at that beginning point, and how much of it did you sort of figure out as you went along?
I think you've answered it quite there. It was quite a lot of figuring out as we went along. Sorry, just hang on. No worries. I do apologise. It's workmen just turning up to fix a dripping tap of mine. I think there's a huge amount of it that we learned as we went along. The whole rebrand, we both needed to, but wanted to detach away from the name of Fiddlers when we were looking about what it was about. The way that I wanted to drive the business at the time was very much about that connection to kind of rural lifestyle, not just to do with, the production of food and using the food, the music and the connection to the community and the land and the sea was everything. And then it kind of materialized that actually our gut instinct, like our gut ethos, like what we felt both as people and as a family, was that if we could revert back to how we worked in, those ways from the land and sea, even only 150 years ago, that was actually the sustainable way in terms of environmental and ecological sustainability. Then, there was more, as we talked about growing the business, actually looking at exit strategies of the business. We then started looking at how sustainability encapsulated more than just the environmentalism and the ecological aspects, but also the economical, viability of the business. And also then when we started looking at employability and the recruitment and the staffing model, and how sustainability grew from being, kind of as everybody else is talking about, not using single-use plastic, to looking at renewable energy sources, to the whole thing. And for sustainability for us, as I think it is for a lot of people, really has coined into the definition of running particularly in relation to business, is something that you can perpetually promote without depletion of resources. And it was about creating, we still are creating this business model that allows us to use what is naturally resourced here: food, energy, water, staff, train them, develop, to grow all of that, and then to reinvest right back into the grassroots. And there's so many metaphors. We talk about the grassroots of society, those amateur or junior level hobbyists, whether that's new musicians or growers or everything else. But we also talk about our grassroots music, because it's that kind of nostalgic connection to what the fundamentals are. And I think for us, it was really about getting back to the fundamentals of what business is about and what sustainable rural lifestyle and life skills are. And that's definitely been an ongoing growth and development since we started kind of the Crofters campaign, 3 years ago now.
Yeah. Sounds like, the solid foundation was there in terms of really thinking about how your ethos and values plug into what you're doing over at Crofters. We talked, before we jumped on this live, we were talking about sustainability and that word, and how it sort of takes different meanings depending on who you're talking to, and whether really as a society we know what sustainability means. And maybe there are different meanings depending on, your where you are in society, what you're doing, and what your business is. What would you say, Ealána, is the kind of meaning of sustainability to you when you hear that word and you're kind of driving that within your business? What is the definition for you? What does it mean?
I suppose one of the easiest ways for me to think, have you ever seen the film or the program Snowpiercer?
No.
So it's about a perpetual moving train that, I won't go into the story, the depths of the program, there's lots there, but the whole point is that there is this train that perpetually runs forever. And as long as everything works in equilibrium, it maintains itself indefinitely. And for me, that is what sustainability should be about. It is a unique ecosystem that works with everyone else in harmony and in existence, so that it becomes to an equilibrium level where it just is perpetuating. And the biggest thing is that it cannot be depleting of resources. And resources can be absolutely everything from nutrients in the soil to cash flow to staff to energy levels to personal health and mental health as well. But that there is something that is all-encompassing, that is warming. And in the same way as we talk about like an ecosystem, like in your garden, everything's got to be in balance, everything's got to be in harmony, but that it can continue and sustain itself indefinitely.
That's a powerful definition, and I can just see that train. I haven't seen this movie that you're describing, but I can just imagine something moving, and as long as it keeps getting what it needs to perform, then it keeps going ultimately. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that, because sometimes it's like how I felt about digital transformation and phrases like that a lot of people start talking about it because it seems important right now and it's topical.
Yeah.
And I just found that it's just, sustainability is similar, where we don't really know what we're doing about it yet, but everyone's talking about it. And it's always refreshing to speak to someone who is actually doing it, taking those steps within their business. And I know that the actual nirvana isn't there. Like, we're all on a journey, but starting to take those steps and consciously going, is this sustainability? How can we drive this part of the business to be more sustainable? And I think those are some of the questions that we can be asking ourselves. So when we look at what you're doing now, it'd be great for you to share what are some of the practices in your business, and how does it impact decision making within your business, Ealána?
From ours, like the biggest thing that impacts kind of our decision making is where we source our products from. So, if we bring it straight back to the larder, but also extends to the restaurant and to the micro distillery as well, is that our ambition is that we're sourcing exclusively from the 30 miles surrounding of the restaurant, that it is that local, and that the people that we do source from are family run, independently owned, who and living off their own backs. That is kind of the first big strategic aim, I would say, that we have, is that if we can look at where our provision of food is coming from, then we know that we're directly contributing back to regenerative agriculture in the area, putting nutrients back into the soil, supporting families develop and grow, and supporting an economy here that actually can start growing again, because it did very much become quite depleted. Other ways is the not using plastics at all. And that's when we start looking into the bigger, wider world picture. Not only are we reducing our food miles and the impact of transporting things, from hundreds of thousand kilometers away, but also plastic not actually contributing to the kind of petrochemical industry as well, tying away from that. One of the biggest challenges there with it is that actually sourcing, particularly exterior packaging for the food and drink production side of the business, is quite challenging. Now, whilst there are lots and lots of, I would say all mainstream, exterior packaging are now cardboard based, they are made from recycled products, they are recyclable in themselves. It's not cost efficient for the scale of business that we are, because we're quite small. We'd need to buy on huge volume to be able to compete with the price of packaging with the likes of the bigger companies do. But equally, it is so accessible to just not have to use plastic or plastic inserts or plastic infoams. The development in that side of the industry is fantastic. What I'd really like is to be able to bring that home and bring it closer and have it more affordable for small, low-key manufacturers and businesses to be able to do so. And the third kind of way that we're looking at is about the long-term energy provision of the businesses, I will say, is to, we want to be completely self-sufficient and off the grid, whether that's a combination of solar, wind, geothermal, actually water turbine, I think, is probably going to be one of our greatest energy assets, and storing that way to actually become off-grid. And likewise, our water provision. We are looking at ways in which we can more sustainably and environmentally, health code wise, like with legislation and stuff, look at using rainwater, boreholes and natural spring to support and sustain what we are doing as a business. Sorry. So the fourth one for us, so it's kind of supply and provision, energy production. It's then waste. Is kind of fourth level. For us at the moment, we are doing everything we can to compost all food waste. But equally, we need to be able to start developing into our business model how waste is returned back into the kind of ecosystem of what we're doing. That's where we start coming into circular economy aspects. We ourselves are looking at putting in an anaerobic digester to help to digest all food waste and all organic matter. So that in itself creates more energy provision for the business, but ultimately not contributing to landfill. But a big part of what I want to develop is both a safe and compliant way of having a return of packaging, jars and glassware and stuff, and have that come back into the business or back into the circular economy, so that everything from bottom to top is contributing to the development and the growth and that perpetuation of environmental, ecological, and economical sustainability.
Wow, I mean, those are four powerful pillars that are all being kind of considered in tandem. I was just going to say, if you're listening now or later and you would like to ask a question, or you have a comment around sustainable business, or you have a question, feel free to put that in the chat and we'll be more than happy to address any of your questions. You touched on something. I remember when we had the discussion on Clubhouse, and you used the word here as well, that whole economic piece. And one concern I've always had around sustainability and looking at businesses that are looking to adopt sustainable practices is what the economic impact is. So if I take the example of you going to the shop, when I go to the shops, I'm going to spend far more if I decide to go for an organic product versus one that is not organic, right? It just feels like it's more expensive. Putting it bluntly, it feels like it's more expensive to do the right thing. And it's that discussion around economically, are businesses being called to make less profit? Are they being called to pass on these additional costs to their customers? What does that look like? And when you're considering these three pillars, what's the economic impact that you're seeing?
Yeah, economics is definitely one of the most challenging things, because without economics, you don't have business. And equally, without profit, you don't have business. I agree with you. It's really challenging. It is really hard, particularly for anyone, to be honest, who doesn't have disposable income, to select to do, as you say, what is deemed to be the right thing or the better thing when it has a negative financial impact on themselves. It is challenging. It's really hard. And it's particularly challenging for a business like myself, who, at a micro stage, wants to ensure that everybody's paid fairly and remunerated well for their skills, and that they can afford to live in the area. It does make it extremely challenging. And one of the big things for me is that we've had to achieve scalability of production far quicker than we would have otherwise done so, in order to make it financially viable for the business to operate. And also, it has also priced it out of the general supermarket kind of area. Now, there's two hands on this. There's one is that the social economic side of it, I get really upset about, because I want to be able to support and provide for people who need that nutrition, that need that level. One hand, the business just isn't at that size or that scale yet to be able to do so. Equally, there is a huge artisan product market. So when we talk about the restaurant and the larder in particular, but there is a huge artisan market that has a huge demand. Unfortunately, it does price a lot of what we are doing out of the kind of general consumer side. It is really frustrating. It's one of my biggest bugbears about it all. Equally, there are opportunities that we are looking to move out of the business to help support, kind of the lower socioeconomic families in the area, or those that are deemed as vulnerable, with actually the raw ingredient provision. And that's an area that we're looking at doing with the larder, is actually growing our own fruit and veg. Or, we are, for us, I would say we are tertiary producers, really. But we work with 3 social enterprises and 1 charity on the island. So we buy their glut of produce. Their whole provisional growing model is to support families to feed people directly with fruit and veg. But if we then make use of what otherwise would have gone to landfill because it's not being consumed, or it's gone past its best to sell, not go moldy or over that, but it's got too big, or it's wonky, or it's not aesthetically ideal, we can then turn that into the added value kind of artisan product, which in turn means that I pay them so they can afford to pay their staff, or buy more seeds, or buy more stuff. And so for us, taking that step away from the direct direct to people as fresh fruit and supply, making use of the secondary and tertiary aspects of food production, we can then create the added value product, which we can market to the more affluent, who have disposable income, that have the money to be able to actually have a say in where they can spend it, and in turn be able to reinvest that back into the grassroots of the local economy here to support those that actually need it. And that's a big part of kind of the economic circular economy that I'm looking for. We're talking purely business here. We're on LinkedIn. I probably wouldn't say some of the same directly to a restaurant customer, but we are in a tourism area. We have people who come to the island to come on holiday here. The island is generally 4-star kind of level. It's also not a cheap place to live. We're probably one of the most expensive places outside of the home counties in Cornwall to buy a house or to live. Kind of real living wage is the minimum wage here. Everyone pays like $9.50 starting salaries. And so I really get that kind of clinch between can't afford to, or don't perceive the value of spending on what is deemed as being sustainable or the right thing to do, compared to those who can and can make the choice because they can afford to do so, and actually having it support an entire economical ecosystem that way.
Okay.
Does that make
sense?
That's
really powerful. It does, and it nicely links the circular economy discussion with sustainability, and it almost feels like, from what you're saying, that circular economy is probably the way for it to make sense.
Yeah, it is for us,
basically. Yeah. That
like,
makes sense.
We can get angry and upset and emotional, and there's a whole other debate to be had around politics and social economics, and the fact that the imbalance of power associated with finances, it's completely different argument. But there is a way that if many people at a similar sort of time start creating ripples, then huge waves can occur. And it's not going to be the government or the big corporations. It's not going to be Mars and Unilever that are going to set the standard or set the tone for expectations of sustainability. It's going to be other people like myself. It's going to be the grassroots micro businesses that are scattered throughout Scotland and the UK. They're actually going to start creating these ripples. There's so many wonderful examples of local areas working together. Like Arran is probably one of the best of them, as far as I can see. The whole collaborative, connective thinking between, kind of the 4 pillars we've talked about already, of trying to create a self-sufficient, sustainable, environment and an area. So yeah,
that's really interesting. And you spoke a little bit about, obviously, it not being the big bodies and government and so on that really will drive this, which it's true for a lot of things that we're looking to achieve as a society. It's really coming together and everyone doing their bit, as they say. But it'd be interesting to know from you, Ealána, what sort of support that you have received so far in your journey around driving sustainability in your business. If someone's listening now and thinking, I would really love to get some advice, I would love to get some support, what would you say to them? Where would you point them to?
One of the biggest challenges that actually to this date so far, we've not received a huge amount of support. Now we've received loans, which are based off cash flow projections and, business plan viability and all of that stuff. We haven't yet started to receive any financial support, in grants or that way. Fundamentally, it's because you need to have a project. You actually need to have a project together ready to implement at the point of application, but you can't spend it until it's been awarded. Now, for us at the moment, we are right up at the nail. We are just moving forward. We've got to get things done. We've got to get things happening far quicker than kind of the bureaucracy allows for in relation to getting grant funding and support funding. I have, however, had lots and lots of support through particularly the Business Gateway, but I'm also I've been awarded onto the Impact 30 scheme with the Highlands and Islands Enterprise, and we've actually got support through Scottish Enterprise for lots of small different elements across the whole businesses. And, it's been through the consulting that we've been able to consolidate the business model, the business plan, trying to piece it all together. Now, again, it's much slower than we move. We're quite lucky that there's three of us really at the head of the team, my dad, myself, and my partner. We can make decisions and turn around and action it right there and then. Bigger corporations, bureaucracies don't work like that. They don't have those options. So it has all taken much longer. My hope is over the next 12 months with the consulting support that I'm getting through the Impact 30 is that we'll get the business to the point where it is operationally sustainable, as in the production of the food and the selling of it all, that's fine. So that I can really start looking at the project development of the other areas. And I know we talked about this on the Clubhouse conversation a couple of weeks ago. Big places for that are the likes of Zero Waste Scotland, Scottish Enterprise, Business Gateway. I'm in North Ayrshire, so I'm really lucky at the moment that there is a transition fund that's come available. On one hand, and it is backed by Scottish Government, so it might be available in other councils, I would assume so, is that there's one element for digital development and the other side's for green innovation. Digital development and green support is the campaign. With COP26 this year, the Plastic 25 Challenge, there's so many kind of initiatives coming through that, or about to come in, or new policies that come in next year, over the next couple of years, that there's going to be lots and lots of support there for people who are looking for it. The NFU and Food and Drink Scotland, if you're in the food side, a lot of support is available, or is going to be coming available, particularly for startups. One of the biggest challenges is that when you're not looking for support, it seems to be there. But when you actually need it right there and then, it's not always attainable, or you've maybe just missed it. And what I found is that you have to develop the business and grow the business off your own means, whether you need, capital investment from banks or loans, or however you decide to do it that way. And then you need to be able to develop the projects and have the projects sat waiting for when the funding support is there for it. And for us, we're a year old. I started this off the back of my savings during lockdown. We're not quite yet there at the big kind of venture capital development side of it all.
You said a couple of things that are really interesting. In fact, that last point, if I touch on it first, about funding being available when you don't need it, and it's into just missed the deadline when you need it. And it's such good advice, because I think it's the same across all the sectors. And we're in Scotland, and we've definitely been in that situation where there's some funding available. Someone sends you a link and says, this is available. And you're like, we don't really have any projects on the go just now. We're fine. And then you want to do something. It's like, oh, the deadline passed yesterday or last week.
Yeah.
And I think it's really good advice to just always kind of be working in a way that allows you to have these projects in the back burner and be thinking about, if there does come funding available, we have something that we can kind of piece together and apply and get the support. So I thought that was really good advice, because I've definitely been there as a business owner.
Yeah, you almost have to. It's also about having that right, for us, like we've got 4 micro businesses that all work under the same group. We could probably have somebody employed on an almost full-time basis to find grants or to look at the funding applications, to piece together the projects, have the business plan there to run the cash flow narratives. We actually backed out of applying for something which I think would have been really, really good for us. However, we're just not ready for it yet, which was the Rural Payments Working Innovation Fund that closed last week. Because when we started putting it together and they wanted us to demonstrate how our supply provisions satisfied like Annex 3 of whatever section of whatever EU legislation, I was just like, no. Like, and that's one of the things is that I actually hadn't realized, because I come from a science background. I did a science degree. I was going to be going on to do my PhD. I am very much about having everything informed with research and data. Like my business plan reads as a lit review, really, as to why it fits into the project of the whole of Scotland, and particularly on the Agenda 30 initiative. So I love that side. But when you are running a business, you often don't get time, or you don't prioritize doing that research and understanding and ensuring that everything, what's happening in the bigger world and why what you're doing is perhaps relevant to other things. So that when it comes to doing applications, you can actually present a coherent and legitimate argument, really, because that's all they are. You need to compel a reader to understand why you've answered the question as to why you need to achieve that. Whether it's a grade at uni to being rewarded finances, it's the same thing. They've got a question, you have to demonstrate how well you understood the question and can present an argument forward. So
absolutely, I'm there with you, because I'm an engineer by background. So it's really about allowing people to see things through your mind's eye and providing research, some stats, some trends, to really just kind of have the best argument possible as to why this is a really, it's a good idea. And I think, if you've got any business owners listening, you can feel free to put in the chat what your experience is around this sort of thing, pulling together a coherent business plan, having time to do that research around your business, so that, it's quite hard to explain your vision to someone, because it's in your head, it's your baby. And I think the research and the stats help you to explain it much better.
Yes, I agree. In part. The other thing is that I also think that business owners need to understand what their vision is and why they are doing it. And I've spent a lot of time, particularly over the last 18 months since the pandemic started, addressing my own personal why, my own purpose. The development of Crofters Larders, the food production side of Crofters, was very much all to do with fulfillment of my personal why. And so it's made it very, very easy for me to develop brand guidelines, brand ethos and values, and then develop our business principles and policies based upon them, but also develop a mission statement, and then to be able to articulate it to someone so that they understand. And I hope, I've done so today. I know we've waffled on, talked about more. But without understanding the purpose and the why behind what you are doing, or what it is that the business is to be set out to achieve, because you can have a business that doesn't have anything to do with your personal why, but if your business is not fulfilling its potential as you have set out to do so, because it's your business at the end of the day, is it working? Is it doing the right thing? Are you committed to it? And it's all those kind of little nuances. I suppose, we're talking about marketing and branding here instead of sustainability. But at the same point, it all has to have purpose and it all has to have drive and reason. You know, for me here at Crofters Larder, it's very much about creating a sustainable business model that creates the circular economy that fulfills my personal purposes. But for anybody looking at creating a business full stop, like at all, they do need to think about all those things. And ensuring that their own personal, and again, I'm going to use sustainability because their drive, their vision, their energy, their commitment to running that business needs to be sustainable. And for too many people, myself included, I'm on the breaking point moment, reach burnout. And business owner sustainability of their own energy, not reaching burnout, having cash flow and liquidity, sustaining relationships outside of the business, whether you've got family, kids, mortgage, the whole thing, the whole of the life has to be sustainable as well. And that's where, for me at the moment, I've got to learn how to move myself forwards without compromising my integrity or to the detriment of my own health. And I think for many, many business owners, that's a big challenge.
That's a really interesting point, because in my head, I just had this set of words: sustainable entrepreneurship, right? So, being not just your business, but you, like your resources, your time, your energy, is it sustainable? And it's a really, really, really good point. I have two quick things that I wanted to ask you, but I just wanted to say, anyone listening just now or later that has got a question or a comment, feel free to put it in the chat. There are two things that came to mind. The first thing was around your vision for Crofters over the next, whatever number of years. What's your vision? What are you driving towards? And I'm going to say the second question just so that I put it out there. What do you believe needs to change in the way we measure performance of businesses, so that it's incorporating not just the finance stuff? So you talked about, we talked about business plan and that whole cash flow, and that's what everyone asks you about. Oh, we want to see your cash flow. What's your profitability? Are you going to reach 500,000 in 5 years or whatever, 3 years? What more needs to be added to that so that the full picture of what businesses are doing around sustainability is also captured and included in that measurement of success? But yeah, I'll probably have to repeat that question because I appreciate it's quite long-winded. But what's your vision? What's your vision, Ealána, for Crofters over the next wee while?
The vision for Crofters, so I suppose similarly to the four parts, like kind of the pillars of the model of sustainability as well, kind of similar for the business. In the next year, I want the restaurant still and the larder to be operationally sustainable without mine or my partner's direct involvement. That's kind of the first vision, so that we can work on the business instead of for it. In 3 years, I would like to recommence the rebuild of the restaurant premises. And in 5 years, I would like to be looking to replicate this elsewhere in rural Scotland. By that third year before the rebuild, we want to being able to demonstrate the sustainable business model. It's going to come into your next question a little bit about metrics and models and percentage margins and stuff as well. But so that we can then replicate it elsewhere in rural Scotland to help contribute to a circular economy there. Our ambition is not to grow exponentially. I don't want one business that grows and grows and grows and grows and grows and grows until the point in which it collapses. We would like to have multiple businesses under, I suppose, what would be a franchise model, really, potentially, that are replicas of themselves elsewhere, that they have the same, maybe they've got the same products and same output, but we would have a restaurant, a food production, a micro distillery, microbrewery, maybe on Islay, maybe on Mull, maybe on Skye, so that we can support growing of fruit and veg and the rearing of livestock in those areas, contribute to the economy by providing employment, but also bringing tourism and financial resources to that area. So that's kind of the long-term ambition, I suppose. The fourth one is actually to have potentially Crofters Larder is here as a hospitality and skills development training centre. I would like to be able to have our own training academy where people can come in from school or whatever stage and develop and grow with the business from the grassroots right at the beginning, potentially to actually owning their own restaurants, whether that's in their own outright or us supporting and facilitating them taking on additional Crofters premises elsewhere. Trying to be able to develop that culture of growth and development and personal skills development in a really kind of rural, organic way, if that makes sense. In terms of second question, to kind of summarize, I just want to make sure that I've got it right. Basically, what metrics are we recording?
Well, yes, in addition to, the hard stuff, what are some of the, I don't know whether it's called in softer matrix, it might not be, they might still be hard. What do we need to be as a business, the business society, reporting on beyond just numbers so that we can capture sustainability and how well businesses are incorporating it into their models?
I suppose it's hard. Like we're coming at it from a very different side to you would do if you were in tech or manufacturing of things that weren't associated with food. I suppose it's still manufacturing at the end of the day. Obviously, you've got your standard, and what we've been working on this morning is that actually ensuring that our projected turnover is enough to even cover overheads. That's obviously an important thing. But in terms of other things to be measured, I think it's hard to measure things that don't have a number attached to them. Qualitative kind of gut feel, or even if you can generate data on enthusiasm or opinions and stuff like that, it still needs to be data. Fundamentally for us, things that we can measure beyond, making money is how much our waste output is. Like, waste, foods waste, any waste going into the bin is cash reserves going down the drain, quite literally. Energy consumption and provision. We can actually look at what is costing money as well as costing resources by being on standby instead of being turned off, or actually is it more efficient to keep it on all the time than turning it off for a few hours a day or back on, these sort of things. And having an energy consumption audit is probably a really good way for businesses, particularly those that are maybe up off the ground a little bit more, because then we can look at where it's coming from. And then I would say beyond that is actually where the kind of what's the words I'm looking for, are like suppliers, is how they are actually implementing or doing things. Because you can't create a sustainable business if your supply chain are unsustainable. Now, that might be that they are on the brink of economic failure. They might be looking at liquidation or bankruptcy, but equally they could be doing nefarious things to the environment. If they are not sustainable or not practicing sustainability, you can then base your model on it. It falls apart. In foods, we have to know from field to mouth and back again exactly where everything has gone. If you think about it in the same of packaging and resources, if I started using a company, it might be cheaper or whatever else, that it turns out are deforesting, the Amazon, I'm putting it out there as a big thing, they're felling rainforests to make those boxes and shipping them across. That's not sustainable for me. So it's then, once the business has got scope and has got a level of size to it, I would say, is being able to actually look at things beyond that which the business directly impacted or impactful upon. And I think going back to probably your very, very first comment, maybe it was before we even went live, asking about the big companies and how it seems to be really challenging for them to make changes, or it takes a long time, or it has to be signed off by a board of directors, or maybe it's the greenwashing, maybe everything. And I think it's quite simply, it's down to those supply chain challenges. So at the moment, the supply chain's in the news and in the media at the forefront of people because we don't have enough HGV drivers. So, food and things are not being transported. That's one very small element of the supply chain challenge. If you've got a big company, and it might be a big company in terms of output production, not necessarily beyond that of an SME. If their suppliers are not making sustainability changes or practices, that company might not be able to make changes. Some of the bigger companies are tied into contracts. If they decide to make a sustainability change, but their suppliers won't, they might not be able to get out of that. It might be too cost effective. We talk about margins, we talk about a model. Now, say you've got a business model that's based on either 100,000 units based on 94 pence a unit at wholesale rate. If your exterior packaging goes up by a penny, what is that infiltration across the entire cash flow? And whilst me, a small person with a micro, there's 2 of us employed, a turnover about 70,000 at the moment. It's not a big company at all. That margin, that change could be the difference between insolvency and profit. And on someone on treble that, it's, I know it's proportionate, its own margins might be those little things that are different. And I think that is the 3 big things that can be monitored and controlled: waste output, energy consumption, and the other supply chain challenge, other suppliers within the supply chain. Equally, it's that last one that's not happening in the bigger world because the cost implication is huge. And also social demographics of it are huge as well. And I think for many people, that's not yet been thought about, talked about. It's easy for me to say, I'm just not buying into it. I'm not having anything to do it. We don't use soy. We don't use quinoa. We don't use avocados. We don't use vanilla from Madagascar. We're very, very conscious over where we source our coffee or chocolate and vanilla because we don't want to be contributing detrimentally to lifestyles and cultures and ecologically to those environments. But for many, there might not be an opportunity to not do so.
Yeah. It's a really good point. I guess it's a little bit like what I was saying earlier about buying organic and non-organic. I mean, if I was well-to-do, then I'm happy to spend double on on a particular product that might be better for the environment, better for me. But if I just can't afford it, then it's kind of asking too much of me, really.
And it is also big things like huge big corporation companies that I don't get behind, are not sustainable, are not good in any shape or form to the world. But if they start changing their practices, say they took the same approach that I have to everything and said, nope, we're not doing it, this is the way we're doing it. Now, yes, mass reform across the entire planet, but how many people are going to fall out from that? How many are going to lose their jobs? How many are going to lose their livelihoods? The impact of that is going to be huge. And this is where we then end up into ethics and on a global world, political ethic level, completely different project again. It is challenging. It is hard. There's big things that the huge corporations, the global conglomerates could do to make huge impact to all. But without there being a safety net to protect the vulnerable people at the bottom of it, it might not necessarily be the right thing.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ealána. I think, sorry, go on. You're going to say something. Yeah. I think every time I have this conversation, not just with you, but anyone who's doing stuff around sustainability, there's so many more questions. And I feel like we could keep talking for like another hour. There's so many things that come up, and it's just wrapping our arms around this and talking about it and getting those questions out there and, getting feedback so that we can grow and go forward. But I'm really delighted that you joined me today, Ealána. So much that you've achieved and will achieve. And if anyone's listening now or later and would like to get in touch with Ealána, I'm sure your open to people, sending you a LinkedIn message, connecting to ask more questions around sustainable business and what she's been able to achieve. In the meantime, I want to bid you farewell. I do have another sustainable business owner this month, Deborah Breen of Wild Modes. She's based in Dundee and really exciting what she's doing. So I hope you join me next week for another chat on LinkedIn Live. Thank you, everyone. Bye now. Thanks, Ealána.
Cheers. Thanks, Yukimi.